for something to listen to? These are a few of my favorite science podcasts. This isn't a sponsored endorsement or anything. These people probably don't even know I exist. But I'm a fan of their podcasts, and here's a little bit more about why.
I listen to a lot of podcasts, especially on the weekends when I'm doing chores and stuff. And so since it's weekend, I'm doing chores, I thought I'd tell you about some of what I'm listening to. So some of the main podcasts I listen to are TWiM, TWiV, TWieVO, Immune, Skeptics Guide to the Universe, TWiS, This Week in Science, Editors in Conversation, and Meet the Microbiologist. And so this whole like TWiM, TWiV, TWieVO, Immune, these are all part of this Microbe TV. Basically, this is a group of podcasts that are led by Vincent Raffagnello, who was a professor at Columbia and is a virologist. And he started this Week in Virology podcast, TWiV, and then it kind of like branched off and you have all these different podcasts. And so there's a bunch of different hosts for these different podcasts. And what I like about these is they go really in depth into scientific papers and have discussions between PhD scientists that are really, this is like their field. So you'll have virologists discussing virology papers. You'll have evolutionary biologists discussing evolution. You'll have immunologists discussing immunology, microbiologists discussing microbiology. And they'll be going in detail in these papers. So it's kind of like listening to a journal club. And so it's really, really helpful, especially when you're like in grad school. And so I actually discovered TWiV during the pandemic in grad school, and it really helped me get through the pandemic and really understand what was going on. In terms of TWiV, there were some things that kind of like turned me off of it. And the classic TWiV, if you go to the pre-pandemic episodes, they kind of go deeper dives into papers. And I really love them. I'm actually currently like binging the episodes. I'm in like 2018 and going backwards. So I'm having a really good time listening to those. And so basically in each episode, what they do is they choose a couple of articles to highlight, and they go through those articles. They go through what the question was, what the experiments they did. They analyze the figures. And so they take this really critical approach. And it's really great to learn about different methods that are used, how scientists go about analyzing things. So I'm not a virologist, but there's a lot of cool biochemistry and things that in these papers that they go into. And so there is a lot of relevance. Plus, we use viral things like viral proteins in the lab all the time for different purposes. And so even though I'm not a virologist and some of the more virology stuff isn't really that interesting to me, I still find this really helpful and really interesting. And I like those deep dives. As I mentioned, I started by finding TWiV, and then I kind of like branched out to see what else was in this TWiX universe this weekend, something, although not all of them are named that way. So in addition to TWiV, there's This Week in Microbiology, so TWiM, This Week in Evolution, TWieVO. There's also a This Week in Neuroscience, a TWin, This Week in Parasitology, a TWiP. And then there's Immune, which isn't this weekend, maybe because it would be like TWiV or something, I don't know. But basically, these are the four that I listen to. And I really like This Week in Microbiology. What I like about this one is, in addition to going in depth into the papers, they actually contact the paper authors, the first author, so like the grad student or the postdoc that actually did the bulk of the work. They find out more about them, they talk to them, they really give them a little bit of the spotlight, which is really nice because often the corresponding author, so that's kind of like the head of the lab, gets all the credit for the work. And in this podcast, they really make an effort to kind of humanize things and give a look at the people doing the work. And it's really great. And the hosts are also very supportive of undergraduates and undergraduate research, all this sorts of things. So really positive things there in addition to really cool science. I also like This Week in Evolution. I've never actually been to one of their live recordings, but they actually do like live recordings on YouTube and things, and they interact with the people, allow you to ask questions and this sort of thing. And so TWieVO is another good one. And then Immune, so this is immunology. Again, none of these are really my exact field of study, but what I like about them is that you really get to hear scientists discuss papers and really be critical of work. And I like this kind of like critical analysis of things and learning about how you would analyze things, learning about new techniques, all of this various things. that might not be applied to the exact subject that I study, but it's gonna still be helpful. And I wish there was like a this week in biochemistry, like a TWiV. So if anyone's listening and wants to do a TWiV, that'd be really, really awesome. But in the meantime, I'll stick with what I can find, and that would be these ones. So these ones, this is the one that's going to go most in depth into individual articles. There are also a couple I listen to, so Skeptic's Guide to the Universe and This Week in Science, where these ones kind of go not in as much detail, not in nearly as much detail, but over more different things and a variety of different topics, because the hosts are from wildly different fields. With Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, you're going to get some things that are more up my alley, things like medicine, some biology, some neuroscience, you're also going to get some material science, some astronomy, and yeah, all sorts of different stuff. And so none of it is exactly my cup of tea, but I still really enjoy it. And because they're going to be like shorter little things about these different stories, if there's a story that doesn't interest you that much, it'll be over soon, and then there'll be one that might interest you more. One of the things I like about this podcast is it kind of debunks various things you might see, like headlines in the news or things that politicians or special interest groups are trying to use as kind of ammunition. And it shows you what the science actually says, as well as whether there's problems with how the study is set up. And so various things like this that help you think critically, and I really enjoy that. They also have other cool segments. So sometimes they do interviews with various people. My favorite thing is science or fiction, where they kind of they have one of the hosts then comes up with like 3 science stories, 2 facts and 1 fiction, and then the other people have to try to figure out which one is the fact and which one is the fiction and which ones are the facts. And it's kind of fun hearing them kind of process things out. They also go through different science stories. They have some things that are more like skepticism, like pointing out logical fallacies and reasoning and things like this. So it's really fun. I enjoy it. I would say that they're not quite skeptical enough when it comes to some of the biochemistry. They get kind of really excited about things like CRISPR, and then you're like, yeah, it's really not as easy as you think it is, but you go with that excitement. So I wish they had some biochemists on there sometimes, but yeah, it's a good podcast and I enjoy it. I also enjoy TWiS, so This Week in Science. It's not related to those other like TWiV, This Week in those other podcasts. With This Week in Science, they really just kind of go surface level with various stories, sometimes in a little more depth, but not those really deep dives. And what I wish about this one is that they would actually kind of like discuss more about like where these papers are published and who's doing them and things like this, rather than just putting them in the show notes, like, because when you're listening, you'd want to know. And so just as a scientist, it's like I want to know a little more about where this is coming, this study is coming from, and where it's published and stuff, so I can find out more. But I could always just go to the show notes and find out more. I'm just sometimes not that I forget to go back. But anyway, yeah, so this is another one where they're kind of just going short into various stories, but they go through a lot of different stories, and it's all like really recent stuff. So some of those like headline stories, they'll go in a little more critical look than the headlines will tell you. But again, it's not like a super critical deep dive into the papers and going over the figures and stuff like you would get with those TWiS ones. Getting a little more wonky into the weeds, we have a couple that are from the American Society for Microbiology. One of them that I like is this Editors in Conversation. So basically the ASM, they have some different journals, and one of the ones that I find a lot of interesting articles in for my work is the antimicrobial agents in chemotherapy, which goes over like antibiotics and things like this. And so they have some of this podcast is going over like various things that come out of that journal, as well as more broader trends in the field. And so they have some of these podcasts are going to be focused from that journal. There are also some of them that are going to be from the Journal of Clinical Microbiology, or JCM. And so those are a little too like clinical for me. But I like, they kind of like switch off between JCM and AAC. So I like listening to the AAC ones. But if you're into clinical microbiology, they've got the JCM ones as well. They also have this podcast, Meet the Microbiologist, where they do interviews with microbiologists, as well as they do some like historical dives. So they had some cool ones going over things like Francois Bourassanos's discovery of HIV, various cool things like this. And so that's another one that I like. So huge thanks to the host of all of these podcasts for putting out this great content. I really, really appreciate it. And I know I said a couple of nitpicky things, but I really love these podcasts. So thank you. So I hope this gave you some ideas about what to listen to. And now it's back to my chores.